The year was 1882, and baby cries echoed through the big ranch house in Arizona Territory. But these weren't tears of joy. When little Mary came into the world, her father's face dropped like a stone thrown into deep water. "She looks nothing like the others," he whispered to his wife, who was still weak from giving birth. The man had hoped for another beautiful daughter, just like his 3 older girls. But Mary was different from the very first day. While her sisters had golden hair that caught sunlight like spun silk, Mary's hair was dark as midnight. Her skin carried the warm bronze tone of her grandmother's Cherokee blood, and her features were strong and bold instead of soft and delicate. Even as a baby, she seemed sturdier, more solid than her fragile-looking sisters. Her father, Robert, owned one of the biggest cattle ranches in the territory. He was a man who cared deeply about what others thought. In his world, daughters were meant to be pretty ornaments who would marry well and bring honor to the family name. Mary didn't fit this picture at all. As Mary grew from a baby to a little girl, the differences became even more obvious. Her 3 sisters looked like dolls with their pale skin, blue eyes, and tiny frames. They learned to sit quietly, speak softly, and always look perfect. Mary, on the other hand, was full of energy. She preferred running through the fields to sitting in the parlor. She asked too many questions and laughed too loudly. "That girl is going to be trouble," Robert often told his wife. "Look at her sisters. They know how to behave like proper young ladies. But Mary ... she's too wild, too strong-willed." By the time Mary turned 10, her father had stopped trying to hide his disappointment. At family gatherings, he would proudly show off his 3 beautiful daughters to visitors, but Mary often felt invisible. Sometimes she wondered if that was better than the looks of pity she sometimes caught when people noticed her. The other children in town weren't kind either. They had learned from their parents that beauty mattered most for girls. Mary often heard whispers behind her back about how unlucky the family was to have one daughter who didn't match the others. Some people even suggested that maybe she was switched at birth, though they said it quietly. School was no better. While her sisters received invitations to every party and social event, Mary spent most afternoons alone. She found comfort in books and in helping the ranch workers with their daily tasks. The cowboys and farmhands treated her with kindness and respect, teaching her skills that her sisters would never learn. She could rope cattle, read animal tracks, and survive in the wilderness, but these abilities meant nothing in her father's world. When Mary reached 15, the real problems began. Her sisters, now young women, had suitors lining up at the door. Every Sunday after church, young men from wealthy families would come calling, bringing flowers and sweet words. The house buzzed with excitement as her sisters prepared for dances, picnics, and courtship rituals. Mary watched all this from the sidelines. No young man ever asked for her hand at a dance. No one brought her flowers or wrote her poetry. At social gatherings, she became invisible, standing by the wall while her sisters twirled across the dance floor in the arms of eager suitors. Her father grew more frustrated with each passing month. "What am I supposed to do with her?" he complained to his wife. "The other girls will be married soon, but who would want Mary? She's too ... different." The family's financial situation made things worse. A terrible drought had hit the territory, lasting 3 long years. Cattle were dying, crops were failing, and water was becoming more precious than gold. Robert's ranch, once prosperous, was now struggling to survive. He needed every advantage he could get, including good marriages for his daughters that would bring beneficial business connections. By 1900, when Mary turned 18, her father's patience had completely run out. Her 3 sisters were all engaged to successful men from prominent families. Their weddings would strengthen the family's social position and bring valuable business partnerships. But Mary remained unmarried, a burden on the family's resources and reputation. "She eats our food, wears our clothes, and gives nothing back," Robert grumbled during one particularly difficult conversation with his financial advisor. At least the other girls brought us offers and opportunities. Mary just exists. The breaking point came during a town social event. It was meant to be a celebration, but for Mary, it became a night of deep humiliation. She watched as her youngest sister, barely 16, received 3 different marriage proposals in one evening. Meanwhile, Mary sat alone, ignored by every single man at the gathering. On the ride home, her father's anger finally exploded. "This can't continue," he declared. "I won't support a daughter who brings nothing but shame to this family. Something has to be done." That's when fate presented what seemed like a solution, though it would prove to be Mary's greatest challenge. The ongoing drought had created conflicts over water rights between the white settlers and the local Apache tribe. Both groups desperately needed access to the few remaining water sources, and tensions were rising dangerous levels. A meeting was arranged between Robert and the Apache leaders to discuss a possible agreement. The Apache controlled access to a crucial river that ran through their land, and Robert's ranch desperately needed that water to survive. But the Apache had little reason to trust white settlers, who had broken so many promises in the past. The tense negotiations, Robert learned something interesting about Apache culture. Unlike white society, the Apache valued strength, courage, and character over physical beauty in their women. They respected people who could contribute meaningfully to their community's survival and success. As Robert sat across from the Apache leaders, a terrible idea began forming in his mind. Here was a people who might actually value the qualities that Mary possessed: her strength, her resilience, her ability to work hard and survive difficult conditions. Qualities that meant nothing in white society but might be treasured elsewhere. The conversation took an unexpected turn when the Apache chief mentioned that his younger brother, a respected warrior, remained unmarried because no woman had proven worthy of sharing his challenging life. The warrior was known for his high standards and his dedication to his people's welfare. Robert saw his opportunity. In a moment that would change everything, he made a proposal that shocked everyone in the room. He offered his daughter Mary in marriage to secure a lasting peace treaty and guaranteed water access for his ranch. Apache leaders were surprised but intrigued. They agreed to consider the arrangement, but only if the girl proved herself worthy according to their standards, not the white man's standards. For the first time in Mary's life, she might be judged by criteria that could actually work in her favor. But Mary knew nothing of these negotiations yet. She was still living in ignorance of her father's plans, spending her days helping around the ranch and dreaming of a life where she might finally be valued for who she truly was. She had no idea that her entire world was about to change forever, or that her father's disappointment in her was about to lead to the most dramatic decision of her young life. The morning sun was just breaking over the mountains when Mary's world came crashing down. She was in the kitchen helping prepare breakfast, humming softly to herself, when her father walked in with a face like thunder. Behind him stood 3 Apache men, their presence filling the room with an energy she'd never felt before. "Mary," her father said, his voice cold as winter wind, "pack your things. You're leaving today." The wooden spoon fell from her hands, clattering onto the floor. "Leaving? Where am I going, Papa?" "You're going with them," he pointed toward the Apache delegation. "It's all been arranged. You'll be married to one of their warriors. This marriage will secure water rights for our ranch, and finally, you'll serve some purpose for this family." The room spun around her. Mary grabbed the edge of the kitchen table to keep from falling. "Married? But Papa, I don't even know these people. I can't speak their language. I don't understand." "There's nothing to understand," Robert's voice cut through her protest like a knife. "The decision is made. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings." Her mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, but she said nothing. Mary looked desperately toward her sisters, who had gathered to watch the scene unfold. The older sister covered her mouth in shock, while the other 2 simply stared. None of them spoke up for her. None of them protested this cruel arrangement. "But this is my home," Mary whispered, her voice breaking. These are my people, my family. Family takes care of family, her father replied harshly. Your sisters brought honor and good marriages to this house. You brought nothing but worry and expense. At least now you'll finally be useful. The Apache men watched this exchange with careful eyes. The leader among them, an older man with silver-streaked hair and weathered skin, stepped forward. When he spoke, his English was careful, but clear. The girl must choose freely, he said, his deep voice carrying authority. Apache law requires willing hearts, not forced ones. If she refuses, we will respect her decision and find another way to settle our water dispute. For a moment, hope flickered in Mary's chest. But then she saw her father's face darken with rage, and she understood the terrible truth. If she refused this arrangement, she would still have no place in her father's house. He had made it clear that she was unwanted, a burden he was eager to be rid of. At least with the Apache, there might be a chance for something better than the life of shame and rejection she knew here. I need to think, she managed to say. The Apache leader nodded respectfully. We will wait outside while you decide. But know this, young woman, if you come with us, you will be treated with honor. Our ways are different from yours, but we value courage and strength of heart above all else. As the men stepped outside, Mary ran to her room and threw herself onto her bed, sobbing into her pillow. Everything she had ever known was being stripped away from her. The injustice of it burned in her chest like a fire. Her sisters could choose their husbands from dozens of suitors, but she was to be traded away like cattle to strangers whose customs she didn't understand. Her mother finally found the courage to come to her room. Oh, my dear girl, she whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. I'm so sorry. I tried to talk him out of it, but the drought has made him desperate. He sees no other choice. What choice? Mary sat up, her eyes red from crying. He's selling me to save his precious ranch. What about what I want? What about my life? Sometimes life doesn't give us the choices we want, her mother said sadly. But maybe this could be a new beginning for you. These Apache people, they're not what we've been taught to think. The leader spoke of honor and respect. That's more than you've received here. The truth of those words hit Mary like a physical blow. In 18 years of living in this house, she had never felt truly honored or respected by her own father. She had always been the disappointment, the one who didn't measure up to his expectations. An hour later, Mary stood in the front yard with a small bag containing everything she owned, a few dresses, her mother's old Bible, a photograph of her grandmother, and a small wooden horse her grandfather had carved for her as a child. It wasn't much to show for 18 years of life. Her sisters gathered around her, suddenly realizing they might never see her again. The youngest one, only 16, began to cry. Mary, I'm scared for you. What if they don't treat you well? What if we never see you again? Then you'll know Papa got exactly what he wanted, Mary replied, surprising herself with the bitterness in her voice. The Apache leader approached her once more. Have you made your decision? Mary looked back at the house where she had grown up, at the family that had never truly accepted her. Her father stood on the porch, arms crossed, waiting for her to leave so he could get on with his business. There was no love in his eyes, no regret for what he was doing to his own daughter. I'll come with you, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The Apache leader nodded approvingly. Good. My name is Chief Running Bear. The warrior you will marry is my younger brother Joseph. He is called White Wolf by our people. He is a good man, though he can be challenging. He has refused many women because none proved worthy of his respect. What if I don't prove worthy either? Mary asked. Then you will find your own path among our people, the chief replied. We do not abandon those who try to belong. But I think you may surprise yourself and him with what you are capable of. They brought her a horse, a beautiful brown mare with gentle eyes. Mary had learned to ride on the ranch, though her father had never encouraged it. As she mounted, The horse, she felt a strange sense of freedom mixed with terror. The goodbye was brief and painful. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering prayers in her ear. Her sisters each gave her small tokens, a handkerchief, a book of poems, a silver locket. Even they seemed to understand that this might be farewell forever. Her father remained on the porch, not bothering to come down to see her off. "Hopefully this will work out better for everyone," was all he said as they rode away from the ranch. Mary turned back one last time to see the only home she had ever known growing smaller in the distance. The mountains ahead looked vast and mysterious, like another world entirely. She was riding toward complete uncertainty, leaving behind everyone and everything familiar. But as the miles passed, something unexpected began to happen. The Apache. Men riding beside her treated her with quiet respect. They didn't stare at her or make her feel like an oddity. When she struggled with the desert heat, they offered her water without making her feel weak. When her horse stumbled, they helped her without making her feel incompetent. "Your new name will be Strong Heart Woman," Chief Running Bear told her as they made camp that first night. "Names have power among our people. This name says we see strength in you, even if your own family could not." For the first time in years, Mary felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe there was a place in this world where she could finally belong. The Apache camp appeared before Mary like something from a dream. Dozens of traditional shelters dotted the landscape, smoke rising gently from cooking fires. Children ran between the dwellings, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. Women worked together, grinding corn and preparing food, while men tended to horses and crafted tools. It was completely different from the ranch house she had known all her life. Here, everything seemed to flow together naturally, like parts of one big family working toward the same goals. But Mary felt like an outsider looking in. As they rode into the camp, people stopped their work to stare at the white girl who had come to live among them. Some faces showed curiosity, others showed doubt. A few of the older women whispered to each other in their native language, and Mary didn't need to understand the words to know they were talking about her. Chief Running Bear helped her down from her horse and led her to a small shelter that had been prepared for her arrival. "This will be your home while you learn our ways," he explained. "Take time to rest and think. Tomorrow, your real education begins." That first night, Mary lay on a simple bed made of soft animal skins, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling. The sounds around her were different too. No creaking floorboards or ticking clocks, just the gentle sounds of wind, crackling fires, and distant conversation in a language she couldn't understand. She had never felt so alone in her entire life. The next morning brought her first real challenge. An elderly woman named Grandmother Moon appeared at her shelter with a stern expression and gestures that clearly meant "follow me." Mary quickly learned that Grandmother Moon was responsible for teaching her everything she needed to know about Apache life. The first lesson was language. Sitting in the shade of a large tree, Grandmother Moon pointed to objects and spoke their Apache names slowly and clearly. "Water," she would say in English, then repeat the Apache word. Mary tried her best to copy the sounds, but the language was unlike anything she had ever heard. After several frustrating hours of mispronouncing simple words, Mary felt tears of embarrassment burning her eyes. Back at the ranch, she had been considered quite smart, but here she felt like a child struggling with the most basic tasks. Grandmother Moon seemed to sense her frustration. The old woman's stern expression softened slightly, and she placed a weathered hand on Mary's shoulder. Through a mixture of broken English and gestures, she communicated something that gave Mary hope. Learning takes time. Apache children need years. You need patience with yourself. The days that followed were filled with one challenge after another. Mary had to learn how to prepare traditional foods, using ingredients and cooking methods completely foreign to her. She burned her first attempts at making corn cakes and nearly poisoned herself trying to identify edible desert plants. But gradually, something began to change. The Apache women, initially skeptical of this white girl in their midst, started to notice her determination. When Mary failed at a task, she didn't give up or complain. She asked to try again. When she made mistakes, she listened carefully to corrections and worked harder the next time. More importantly, Mary began to discover abilities she never knew she possessed. Her years of helping around the ranch had made her stronger than most women from her world. When the Apache women saw her easily lift heavy water containers and work for hours without tiring, they began to nod with approval. Her skill with animals also impressed them. The Apache prized their horses above almost everything else, and Mary's natural way with the animals didn't go unnoticed. Within weeks, she was helping to train young horses and care for the sick ones. But the biggest test came when she met White Wolf. He appeared one evening, like a shadow materializing from the desert. Mary was sitting by the cooking fire, practicing her Apache vocabulary with some of the younger women, when a sudden silence fell over the group. She looked up to see a tall man watching her from the edge of the firelight. Even in the dim light, she could see the scars that marked his face and arms, evidence of battles fought and survived. His eyes seemed to look right through her, measuring and evaluating everything about her. This was clearly a man who had earned great respect among his people, and Mary immediately understood why he had remained unmarried. He wouldn't accept just anyone as his partner. "So this is the white woman they want me to marry," he said in perfect English, his deep voice carrying no warmth at all. Mary stood up, trying to hide how nervous she felt. "I am Mary. Strong Heart Woman." White Wolf walked slowly around her, like a buyer examining a horse at market. Mary felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she forced herself to stand straight and look him in the eye. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" Mary asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Someone weak. Someone useless. Someone who would cry and beg to go home within a week." He stopped directly in front of her. "But Grandmother Moon tells me you work hard. The horse trainers say you have good hands with the animals, and you haven't begged to leave yet. Where would I go?" Mary replied honestly, "My father made it clear I wasn't wanted at home. This is my chance to prove I can be useful somewhere." Something flickered in White Wolf's eyes, not quite approval, but perhaps the beginning of respect. "Useful is good, but being my wife requires more than being useful. It requires courage, wisdom, and the ability to survive hardships that would break most people." Over the following weeks, White Wolf began testing Mary in ways she never could have imagined. He taught her to track animals through the desert, reading signs in the sand and rocks that were invisible to her untrained eyes. He showed her which plants could heal and which could kill, making her memorize dozens of different species. Most challenging of all, he taught her to survive alone in the wilderness. For 3 days and nights, he left her in a remote canyon with nothing but a knife and a water container, telling her to find her own food and shelter. Mary had never been so frightened in her life. The desert at night was full of sounds she couldn't identify, and every shadow seemed to hide some danger. But she remembered everything White Wolf had taught her about reading the land and finding water. She built a shelter from rocks and brush, found edible roots and berries, and even managed to catch a rabbit in a simple trap. When White Wolf returned to find her not only alive, but actually thriving, something changed in his attitude toward her. For the first time, she saw genuine surprise and respect in his eyes. "Most Apache warriors couldn't have done better on their first try," he admitted. "You have survival instincts that can't be taught. They have to be born in a person." As the weeks turned into months, Mary found herself changing in ways she never expected. Her skin grew brown from the sun, her hands became calloused from work, and her body grew even stronger from the physical demands of Apache life. But the biggest changes were happening inside her. For the first time in her life, Mary felt truly capable and valued. The Apache people judged her by what she could do, not by how she looked. When she successfully helped deliver a difficult birth for one of the horses, the entire camp celebrated her skill. When she correctly identified a healing plant that saved a sick child, the child's mother treated her like family. Most importantly, she was earning White Wolf's respect one small step at a time. He still tested her regularly, but now his challenges seemed designed to help her grow stronger rather than to prove she was weak. The transformation was so complete that when Mary caught her reflection in a stream one day, she barely recognized herself. The scared, rejected girl who had left her father's ranch was gone, replaced by a confident young woman who belonged somewhere at last. 6 months had passed since Mary first arrived at the Apache camp, and the day of her wedding to White Wolf had finally come. But this wasn't like any wedding she had ever imagined as a little girl. There were no white dresses or church bells, no fancy decorations or formal ceremonies like the ones her sisters had enjoyed. Instead, the entire tribe gathered in a circle under the open sky. The women had spent days preparing special foods, and the men had crafted beautiful items as gifts for the couple. Mary wore a traditional Apache dress made of soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork that told the story of her journey from outsider to accepted member of the tribe. As she stood beside White Wolf in the center of the circle, Mary felt a strange mix of emotions. This marriage had started as a business arrangement, a way for her father to solve his problems by getting rid of his unwanted daughter. But over the past months, something unexpected had begun to grow between her and this quiet, intense man. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Chief Running Bear spoke about the importance of partnership in Apache life, how husband and wife must work together like two hands on the same body. They shared water from the same cup and ate food from the same bowl, symbolizing their commitment to provide for each other through good times and bad. When White Wolf looked into Mary's eyes during the ceremony, she saw something she had never seen from any man before: genuine respect and admiration. Not the polite attention her sister's suitors had shown, which was really about their beauty and their father's wealth, but real recognition of her worth as a person. After the ceremony, as the celebration continued around them, White Wolf took Mary aside to a quiet spot overlooking the valley. "I need to tell you something," he said, his usually confident voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. "What is it?" Mary asked, curious about what could make this strong warrior seem nervous. "When your father first offered you in marriage, I thought it was just another burden I would have to bear for the good of my people," he admitted. "I expected a weak, spoiled white woman who would cry every day and make everyone's life miserable." Mary felt a familiar stab of pain at being described as a burden, but White Wolf wasn't finished. "I was wrong," he continued, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. "You are not weak or spoiled. You are stronger than many of our own warriors. You learned our ways faster than anyone expected. You showed courage when I tested you in the desert. And you never once complained or asked to go back to your old life, even when things were hardest." He reached out and gently touched her face, a gesture so tender it made Mary's heart race. Somewhere along the way, this arrangement stopped being about duty and became about choice. "I choose you, strong-heart woman, not because of any treaty or agreement, but because you have proven yourself worthy of respect and love," Mary felt. Tears sprang to her eyes, but these were happy tears for the first time in years. "I choose you too," she whispered. "You saw value in me when my own family couldn't. You pushed me to become stronger instead of accepting that I was useless. You gave me a chance to prove myself instead of just judging me by how I looked." Their first months of marriage were like a beautiful dance of discovery. White Wolf showed Mary parts of Apache territory she had never seen: hidden water springs in the desert, caves filled with ancient paintings, mountain peaks where eagles nested. He taught her the spiritual beliefs of his people, sharing stories and traditions that had been passed down for generations. Mary, in turn, shared her knowledge of the white world with White Wolf. Her ability to read and write made her valuable when dealing with government officials and traders. Her understanding of white customs helped the tribe avoid misunderstandings that could lead to conflict. But more importantly, they began to truly know each other as people. Mary learned that beneath White Wolf's stern exterior was a man who worried deeply about his people's future. He had seen too many tribes destroyed by war and disease, and he carried the heavy responsibility of helping his own people survive in a changing world. White Wolf discovered that Mary's strength came from years of feeling unwanted and learning to rely on herself. Her determination to succeed in Apache life wasn't just about survival. It was about finally finding a place where she could be valued for who she truly was. Their partnership became legendary in the camp. When disputes arose between tribe members, people began asking Mary and White Wolf to help solve them. Mary's ability to see situations from different perspectives, combined with White Wolf's wisdom and fairness, made them natural peacemakers. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the desert sky in brilliant colors, White Wolf turned to Mary with a serious expression. "Do you ever regret coming here?" he asked. "Do you ever wish your father had found you a husband from your own world instead?" Mary considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had been born beautiful like my sisters," she admitted. "Maybe I would have married some wealthy rancher's son and lived in a big house with servants and fancy dresses." "And would that have made you happy?" White Wolf asked. Mary shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. That kind of life would have been built on what I look like, not on who I am inside. The first time I got older or less pretty, or the first time I disagreed with my husband, I would have lost everything. Here with you, I'm valued for my mind, my skills, my courage. That can't be taken away by time or circumstances." White Wolf smiled, one of his rare but beautiful smiles that transformed his scarred face. "Your father thought he was getting rid of a problem when he sent you away. He had no idea he was giving me the greatest gift of my life." As if to prove his point, White Wolf began treating Mary with a devotion that amazed everyone in the tribe. He brought her the first flowers of spring and the most beautiful stones he found on his travels. He listened to her opinions on important matters and often asked for her advice before making decisions. More surprisingly, he showed physical affection openly, something that was unusual for Apache men who typically kept their feelings private. He would hold her hand while they walked through the camp, put his arm around her during evening gatherings, and look at her with such obvious love that even the children noticed and giggled about it. White Wolf acts like a young man with his first love, Grandmother Moon observed one day, chuckling as she watched him help Mary down from her horse with unnecessary gentleness. "Maybe because this is his first real love," Mary replied. "He told me he never wanted to marry before because no woman had proven herself worthy of sharing his life's challenges. But now he says he can't imagine facing those challenges without me." The transformation in both of them was remarkable. White Wolf, once known for his serious, solitary nature, became more open and expressive. Mary, who had spent years feeling invisible and worthless, now carried herself with confidence and pride. Their love story became an inspiration to the younger people in the tribe. Here was proof that true partnership was possible, that two people could make each other stronger and better than they were alone. As winter approached, and they celebrated their first year of marriage, Mary realized that being cast away by her father had led her to exactly where she belonged, in the arms of a man who loved her completely for exactly who she was. 5 years had passed since Mary left her father's ranch, and life in the Apache camp had become more than she ever dreamed possible. She and White Wolf now had 2 beautiful children, a 4-year-old son named Little Eagle and a 2-year-old daughter called Dancing Star. Both children were healthy, happy, and completely loved by the entire tribe. Mary had also become one of the most respected women in the community. Her ability to speak both English and Apache fluently made her invaluable when dealing with white traders and government officials. She had prevented several conflicts by helping both sides understand each other better, and her reputation as a fair peacemaker had spread to neighboring tribes. White Wolf, now a chief himself after his older brother's death, relied heavily on Mary's wisdom and insight. Together, they had guided their people through difficult times, including harsh winters, disease outbreaks, and increasing pressure from white settlers moving into their territory. Mary barely resembled the scared, rejected girl who had left her father's house 5 years earlier. The desert sun had turned her skin golden brown, and her body had grown strong from years of physical work. But the biggest change was in her eyes. They now held confidence, purpose, and deep contentment. On a hot summer morning, everything changed. Again, Mary was teaching her son how to identify animal tracks near the river when one of the young warriors came running into camp, his face tight with worry. "Chief White Wolf, there are white men approaching under a flag of peace. They say they need to speak with you urgently about a business matter." White Wolf found Mary and took her hand. "Something tells me this isn't just any business matter," he said quietly. "Will you come with me to meet these men?" As they walked toward the edge of camp, Mary's heart began to race. Something about this situation felt familiar and frightening. When the group of white men came into view, her worst fears were confirmed. There, looking older and more desperate than she remembered, sat her father on his horse. His clothes were worn and dusty, his face was deeply lined with worry, and his once proud bearing had been replaced by the hunched shoulders of a defeated man. Behind him rode 2 other men Mary didn't recognize, but their expensive clothes and confident manner marked them as businessmen or bankers. Robert's eyes widened in shock when he saw Mary walking beside White Wolf. For a long moment, he simply stared at his daughter, clearly struggling to recognize the confident woman before him. "Mary," he said finally, his voice weak with disbelief, "is that really you?" "My name is Strongheart Woman now," Mary replied calmly, though inside she felt like a frightened child again. "What brings you to our territory, father?" Robert climbed down from his horse slowly, his movements stiff and painful. "We need help. The ranch is in terrible trouble. The drought never really ended, and now the bank is threatening to take everything. I heard that you have become important here, that you help with negotiations between our people and yours." "White." Wolf stepped protectively closer to Mary, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "And what makes you think we would want to help you?" he asked, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "You traded this woman away like unwanted goods 5 years ago? Now you come seeking favors?" One of the businessmen with Robert cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we should explain the situation more clearly. Mr. Morrison owes the bank a substantial amount of money. If he can't pay within 30 days, he'll lose everything, the ranch, the house, all of it. His daughters are already married and moved away, so he has nowhere to go." Robert looked at Mary with desperate eyes. "I know I made mistakes. I know. I treated you badly. But you're still my daughter, and I'm hoping ... I'm praying that you might find it in your heart to help your old father." Mary felt a storm of emotion swirling inside her. Part of her wanted to turn away and let him face the consequences of his choices. But another part of her, the part that had learned Apache values of family loyalty and community responsibility, couldn't simply ignore a person in need, even if that person had hurt her deeply. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said finally. Robert's story came out in broken pieces. After Mary left, the drought had continued for 2 more years. Without access to the river water that the Apache controlled, his cattle had died and his crops had failed. He had borrowed money against the ranch to keep going, always believing that things would get better, but they never did. The other ranchers, who married your sisters, they got access to new water sources through those connections, Robert admitted, his voice filled with shame. "But I threw away my best chance when I sent you away." "You didn't send me away," Mary corrected him firmly. "You sold me. You traded me for water rights because you thought I was worthless." "I was wrong," Robert said, tears starting to flow down his weathered cheeks. "I can see that now. Look at you. You're clearly respected here, important. These people value you in ways I was too blind to see. You've made something of yourself that I never thought possible." White Wolf's eyes flashed with anger. "She always had this strength and wisdom. You simply chose not to see it because you were looking for the wrong things." One of the children from the camp had wandered over to see what was happening, and Robert noticed Little Eagle holding on to Mary's hand. Is this ... is this your child? He asked softly. This is my son, Little Eagle, Mary said, pulling the boy closer. And I have a daughter named Dancing Star. They are the joy of my life, and they are loved by everyone in this community. Robert stared at his grandson with wonder and regret. He's beautiful. He looks strong and healthy. He is both of those things, White Wolf said proudly. Both of our children are growing up knowing they are valued and loved for exactly who they are. They will never doubt their worth the way their mother had to. The words hit Robert like a physical blow. He sank to his knees in the dust, finally understanding the full weight of what he had done to his daughter. I threw away a treasure because I was too foolish to recognize its value, he whispered. Can you ever forgive me? Mary looked down at her father, this man who had caused her so much pain, and felt something unexpected pity. He had spent 5 years learning the same lesson she had learned in her childhood, that judging people by appearances instead of character leads to terrible mistakes. I can forgive you, she said slowly. But that doesn't mean I can forget what you did or pretend it didn't happen. I don't expect you to forget, Robert said, looking up at her with hope in his eyes. I just hope that maybe, if you can find a way to help me, I can spend whatever years I have left trying to make up for my mistakes. Mary turned to White Wolf, speaking to him quietly in Apache. They had a long conversation while Robert and his companions waited nervously. Finally, Mary turned back to her father. We will help you, she announced. Not because you deserve it, but because it's the right thing to do. White Wolf and I have built strong relationships with several tribal leaders in this region. We can arrange for you to lease water rights from multiple sources, enough to save your ranch. Robert's face lit up with desperate relief. Thank you, Mary. Thank you so much. How can I ever repay you? By remembering this lesson, Mary replied firmly. By understanding that true worth comes from character, not appearance. By treating people with respect regardless of how they look or where they come from. As the negotiations continued over, the next several days, Robert stayed in the Apache camp and witnessed firsthand how much his daughter was respected and loved. He saw her mediating disputes with wisdom beyond her years, teaching children with infinite patience, and working alongside White Wolf as a true partner in leadership. On his last evening in the camp, Robert approached Mary one final time. I want you to know something, he said quietly. Watching you these past few days, seeing the life you've built here, the respect you've earned, the love you found, I finally understand what I lost when I sent you away. What did you lose? Mary asked. I lost a chance to know my most remarkable daughter, Robert admitted. Your sisters are lovely women, but they never had to develop the strength and character that you have. They were given everything easily because of their beauty. You had to earn everything through your actions and choices. That made you extraordinary, and I was too blind to see it. Mary nodded slowly. I'm glad you understand now. But I want you to know that being sent away was the best thing that ever happened to me. It led me to a place where I could discover my true worth and find real love. White Wolf appeared beside them, carrying Little Eagle who had fallen asleep. Your father will always be welcome here as long as he treats you with the respect you deserve, he said. These children should know their grandfather, even if he took many years to learn wisdom. As Robert prepared to leave the next morning, he turned to Mary one last time. I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider visiting the ranch sometime? I'd like to show you the improvements I'm going to make with the water access. You've arranged, and maybe you could meet your sisters again. They've often wondered what happened to you. Mary smiled, the first genuinely warm smile she had ever given her father. Perhaps we will visit, but if we do, it will be as honored guests, not as the unwanted daughter coming home. You were never unwanted, Robert said softly.